Imagine writing a novel so brutal, so full of violence and, well, literal feral dog attacks, that after you die, your own sister feels the need to issue a public apology for it.
Right, which is just unheard of.
Completely. I mean, that is the true startling story of Wuthering Heights. And, usually when you pick up a classic Victorian novel, there is this certain expectation of politeness for you as the reader.
Oh, absolutely.
You anticipate stepping into this manicured English garden. You expect empire waist dresses, maybe some quiet misunderstandings in drawing rooms, and a love story that resolves with a very sensible, socially advantageous marriage.
Yeah, because the Victorian literary world was entirely built on those rules of decorum. Novels were, they were meant to be safe spaces. They were supposed to offer a moral compass for both the characters and you, the reader.
But then you open Emily Bronte's text, and suddenly you aren't in a manicured garden anymore. You are standing in the middle of a freezing moor, being attacked by a pack of dogs, while the supposed romantic lead just glares at you with pure, unfiltered hatred.
It's intense. And it remains an absolute shock to the system. I mean, the critics of 1847 certainly felt it.
They hated it, didn't they?
Oh, they really did. When the book was published, reviewers didn't praise it as some sweeping romance. They called it irredeemably monstrous.
Wow.
Yeah, they called it coarse. One particularly shaken critic even described the book as a purposeless power that left readers feeling almost physically sickened.
Sickened by a book that is now sitting quietly on almost every high school reading list in the country. It's wild. So our mission on today's deep dive is to basically strip away that polite classical reputation.
Right, get to the truth of it.
Exactly. We are going straight into our stack of source material, the biographical prefaces, the critical introductions, and those dramatic opening chapters themselves to understand the really transgressive origins of this novel.
It's such a fascinating journey.
It really is. We are going to figure out how an isolated young woman in a rural parsonage managed to write a book that acted less like a novel and more like a visceral hallucination. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to grasp the sheer shock of Wuthering Heights, we have to start by analyzing the environment it came from. Because the contrast between Emily Bronte's cloistered, quiet life and her violently expansive imagination is, well, it's staggering.
Yeah, so Emily was born in 1818, and she was raised in the Hanworth Parsonage in Yorkshire. And this wasn't exactly a cheerful, bustling setting, right?
Not at all.
I mean, the house literally looked out at a crowded graveyard in the front, and then just the wild, desolate moors in the back.
And death was just a constant, inescapable presence in that house.
Hmm.
Her mother died when Emily was only 3 years old.
That's so young.
It is. And then when she was just 7, her 2 older sisters, Maria and Elizabeth, they both died of consumption. They actually caught the disease at a notoriously miserable boarding school.
We should probably pause here and clarify what consumption actually meant back then, because, it sounds like a very polite literary way to just fade away.
Right. It sounds almost romantic in a weird way.
Exactly. But in reality, it was tuberculosis. It was a wasting, bloody, highly contagious, and horrific disease that absolutely ravaged their household.
A truly harrowing reality for a child to witness. So you have these surviving siblings, Charlotte, Branwell, Emily, and Anne, growing up in this incredibly isolated environment. They were raised by an aunt and a father who, oddly enough, had a habit of taking his meals completely alone.
Which just adds to the isolation.
Exactly. And then, in 1826, their father gives the brother, Branwell, a set of 12 wooden toy soldiers.
And that simple gift sparks something massive.
It changes everything for them, really.
I keep picturing kids today playing a sandbox video game like Minecraft or The Sims, where they build these complex, sprawling worlds. But the Bronte siblings didn't just build a world and then grow out of it when they became teenagers, did they?
No, not at all. They poured every single ounce of their adult intellect, their unfolding grief, and their psychological complexity into these worlds.
It's like the fantasy became more real than their actual lives.
What's fascinating here is how that world-building functioned as a coping mechanism that eventually evolved into an obsession. For Emily and her younger sister Anne, this game became the Gondal Saga.
The Gondal Saga, right.
Yeah, it was this intricate narrative involving an imaginary island in the North Pacific. And Emily continued to write about it obsessively well into her adulthood. Lacking social distraction, they turned entirely inward, creating what they called their web of sunny air.
Web of sunny air. I mean, it sounds almost like a sensory deprivation tank.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Think about it. When you are in a pitch-black tank with no outside input, your brain starts generating its own intense, sometimes terrifying reality just to fill the void. The Hayworth parsonage was basically Emily's sensory deprivation tank.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. And, that extreme imaginative isolation is exactly why Wuthering Heights feels so alien to the rest of English literature. Emily was intensely reclusive.
She didn't get out much at all.
She tried going away to school at one point, but she lasted only 3 months. Her homesickness was so severe, it literally broke her physical health. She rarely crossed the threshold of her home except to walk alone on the moors.
And the source material notes, she didn't even interact with the locals. Like, she had almost no practical knowledge of the local peasantry.
Very little, yeah.
She might have known their family histories from a distance, but she rarely exchanged a single word with them.
Because she lacked that basic social interaction. Her writing wasn't influenced by the polite literary salons of London or by the societal norms of how people, quote-unquote, should behave.
Right.
Her mind was a pressure cooker, influenced almost entirely by the raw, physical environment of the Yorkshire moors, the howling wind, and the uncompromised reality of her own internal life.
Which perfectly explains the massive disconnect that happened when the book was published in 1847. I mean, it was released under the intentionally masculine-sounding pseudonym Ellis Bell, and nobody in the literary establishment could reconcile the sheer violence of the text with the reality of the author.
They were totally baffled.
This brings us to what we could call the postmortem damage control.
Yes, because the mystery of who actually wrote the novel was intense. Emily died at age 30. Less than a year after the book came out, right as it was facing this incredibly hostile critical reception.
Just terrible timing.
And people simply could not believe a rural clergyman's daughter was capable of writing something so volcanic.
There was even a great Brontë conspiracy theory going around, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, people speculated that her disgraced attic brother, Branwell, was the true author. The Victorian public desperately needed an explanation for the brutality.
So Charlotte Brontë, who had just achieved massive, respectable success with Jane Eyre, she steps in. In 1850, she puts out a new edition of Wuthering Heights and reveals the true identities of the pseudonyms Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell.
And Charlotte writes an editor's preface for this new edition, but instead of a standard biographical introduction, it reads as a wild, desperate apology.
She's basically doing damage control.
Exactly. She tells the public, look, I admit it. The book is rustic all through. It is naughty as a root of heath. She explicitly questions whether her sister should have ever created a character like Heathcliff in the first place.
She calls Heathcliff unredeemed. She calls him a ghoul and an afrit, which is a type of Middle Eastern demon.
Yes, she really leans into the monstrous aspect of it.
And then Charlotte makes this incredible claim that Emily wasn't really in control of her own work. She argues that Emily's creative gift was this force that strangely wills and works for itself. She compares it to fate or dark inspiration taking over and carving a savage granite statue, leaving Emily with no choice but to accept it.
It's a very dramatic defense.
But wait, isn't Charlotte actually doing her sister a massive disservice here? I mean, she standardizes Emily's unique punctuation in the text and then tells the public, oh, she didn't really know what she was doing. She was just possessed by a muse. Isn't Charlotte just domesticating Emily's raw genius to make it acceptable to polite society?
This raises an important question. And we have to look closely at the why behind Charlotte's defense. From a modern perspective, sure, it feels incredibly patronizing.
Yeah, it really does.
But Charlotte was caught in an impossible, dangerous position. She was trying to protect her sister's literary legacy while simultaneously protecting the surviving family's moral reputation.
Ah, right.
Because of the society they lived in.
Mid-19th century Victorian England was rigidly, unforgivingly patriarchal. Society viewed female creativity, and especially female self-assertion, with deep, irrational misgivings.
Meaning, if a man wrote a violent book, he was exploring the darker sides of human nature. But if a woman wrote a violent book, it wasn't just considered bad art. It was treated as a fundamental moral failing on her part.
Precisely the double standard she was fighting. Charlotte herself had been told years earlier by the poet laureate Robert Southey that literature cannot be the business of a woman's life.
So, framing Emily as a passive vessel for this dark, uncontrollable inspiration was a calculated survival tactic. Charlotte was essentially saying to the critics, don't blame my sister's morals. Blame the untamed Yorkshire moors and the terrifying force of genius that she couldn't control.
When Charlotte called the book savage, she wasn't speaking metaphorically at all. And to see exactly what made the Victorians clutch their pearls, all we have to do is look at how Emily Brontë welcomes the reader in Chapter 1. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, so the year is 1801. We are introduced to our narrator, a gentleman named Mr. Lockwood, who has just rented a property called Thrushcross Grange. He decides to ride over and meet his new landlord, Heathcliff, who lives a few miles away at a farmhouse called Wuthering Heights.
Lockwood arrives at the Heights and he just completely misreads the situation.
He really does.
He looks at Heathcliff and thinks he's found a perfect misanthropist's heaven. Lockwood wants to perform the role of the worldly, cynical gentleman. He actually thinks he and Heathcliff are this suitable pair of relatable introverts who are going to sit by the fire and divide the desolation between them.
It's hilarious because Brontë is using Lockwood as a stand-in for the polite Victorian reader. He brings all these assumptions about hospitality and class to the absolute worst place possible.
Worst place.
The welcome he receives is bizarrely hostile. When he introduces himself, Heathcliff says, "Walk in," through closed teeth.
Walk in.
Yeah, Lockwood literally notes that the tone expresses the sentiment, "Go to the deuce," or basically go to hell.
The polite reader expects a warm fireplace, but Brontë actively punishes Lockwood for his assumptions. Lockwood tries to pet a dog, and the dog growls. He makes a face at the dogs, and suddenly he is attacked by a swarm of fierce four-footed fiends. Juno, Gnasher, Wolf.
Just a full-on attack.
He's pinned down, fending them off with a fireplace poker, and Heathcliff and his servant Joseph just watch him. They don't even hurry to help.
They do not care at all.
Lockwood ultimately has to be saved by a lusty cook named Zillah, who rushes in swinging a frying pan.
Which is just such a chaotic scene. The physical space is rejecting him, and the family dynamic inside the house is just as toxic. When Lockwood returns the next day in a snowstorm, the situation devolves further.
Oh, it gets worse.
He meets a young man, Catherine Earnshaw, who is rough, has unwashed hands, and literally threatens to physically knock Lockwood down for perceived disrespect.
And then Lockwood meets Mrs. Heathcliff, the younger Catherine. She is beautiful, so Lockwood tries to make polite, high society conversation.
As one does.
Right, he tries to compliment her, and she just stares at him with absolute scorn. At one point, Lockwood tries to be charming by complimenting what he thinks is a cushion of pet cats sitting in the corner.
And it turns out to be a pile of dead rabbits.
A pile of dead rabbits. I mean, who does that?
It functions as a brilliant, dark comedy, but the underlying mechanism is deeply unsettling. Catherine plays with matches. She refuses to make tea unless explicitly ordered to. She threatens the religious, elderly servant Joseph with the black art, telling him she will model them all in wax and clay to curse them.
She literally tells him the red cow didn't die by chance. She is claiming to be a witch just to terrorize an old man.
Emily Brontë strips away every single societal norm immediately. Daphne Merkin, in her critical introduction to the novel, notes how the text throws off a strange elemental light.
Elemental light, yeah.
The narrative doesn't clarify human behavior, it adds to the murkiness of human emotion. You are seeing a world that operates by entirely different, savage, primal rules.
But the physical hostility of the house during the waking hours is really just a warm-up. It's a prelude to the psychological and supernatural terror of the night.
Exactly.
So Lockwood gets snowed in, and the cook secretly hurries him into a strange, enclosed, oak-paneled bed to sleep.
This enclosed bed becomes the portal to the true dark heart of the novel, which is the obsessive, destructive love between Heathcliff and the original Catherine Earnshaw.
Right. Lockwood finds the wooden ledge of the bed, covered in writing scratched into the paint. It's just a name, repeated over and over in different variations. Catherine Earnshaw, Heathcliff, Linton.
He finds her old books and starts reading her childhood diary in the margins. It details how she and Heathcliff rebelled against her tyrannical older brother Hindley and how they were tormented by the servant Joseph's oppressive 3-hour-long sermons.
3 hours.
Just brutal. And the claustrophobia of the bed and the intensity of the diaries set the stage for Lockwood's subconscious to take over. He finally falls asleep and has 2 distinct nightmares.
And the first one is weird enough. It's about a sermon involving 490 sins, which absurdly ends in the entire congregation attacking each other with clubs.
Right, which is wild enough.
But then comes the second nightmare, which completely shifts the tone from bizarre comedy to pure horror.
Yeah, this is the famous scene.
A branch of a fir tree has been tapping against the window all night. In the dream, Lockwood reaches out to break the branch, but his fingers close around the ice-cold hand of a ghost.
A child's face looks through the window, wailing, "I'm come home. I've been away for 20 years.
Hold on, I have to stop you there because Lockwood's reaction to this is genuinely shocking. He doesn't just get scared or pull away.
Oh, he doesn't.
He is so terrified that he pulls the child ghost's wrist onto the broken window pane and rubs it back and forth on the glass until the blood runs down and soaks the bedclothes.
It's gruesome.
That is incredibly sadistic for our supposed good guy narrator.
It proves that the feral atmosphere of Wuthering Heights infects everyone who enters it, even the polite gentlemen from the city.
Wow.
Lockwood's screams finally wake Heathcliff, who comes rushing into the room. And when Heathcliff realizes what Lockwood dreamed about, well, his reaction defies all expectations of a ghost story.
He doesn't show an ounce of fear.
Not a bit.
He kicks Lockwood out of the room, gets up on the bed, and wrenches open the window into the driving snow. And he just sobs. He cries out, "Come in! Come in! Hear me this time, Catherine, at last."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we hit the absolute core of what makes this book so enduringly shocking. Daphne Merkin argues that the nature of the love between Heathcliff and Cathy is fundamentally transgressive. It brushes up against our internal censor that says, this far and no further.
Wait, before we move on, when you say she rejected the Enlightenment idea of the autonomous self, which is mentioned in the source material, you mean the classic Western philosophical idea that I am an individual, I make my own choices, and my identity ends where yours begins, right?
Yes.
She's completely throwing that concept out the window.
Exactly that. The Enlightenment tells us that even in the deepest love, you remain two separate, distinct people who are choosing to be together. But Cathy and Heathcliff do not believe they are separate people. They believe they are literally the exact same entity.
Which totally makes sense of that famous quote from Cathy in the source text. She says, "He's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same."
Yes.
And Heathcliff later cries out, "I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul."
Because they view themselves as one single being, physical separation is worse than death. It is an amputation. They cannot survive it. That is why Heathcliff cannot let go of her ghost, and why their love is completely destructive to everyone else in the novel.
Anyone who gets in the way.
Anyone who stands between them or tries to apply normal romantic rules to them is just thrust aside or broken in two.
So what does this all mean? If this isn't a traditional romance, is it actually a ghost story? Or is Brontë saying that absolute all-consuming love is indistinguishable from a haunting?
I think it operates as both. The haunting in Wuthering Heights is the literal manifestation of a love that refuses to be bound by the laws of nature, by polite society, or even by death itself. It trespasses across every boundary we use to keep ourselves safe.
Wow. Okay, let's bring this all together. What we've discovered in this deep dive is that Wuthering Heights is absolutely not a polite Victorian love story. It is a primal, violent fever dream that attacks the reader's sensibilities from page 1.
Very true.
We explored how it was born from the mind of an isolated genius who used a sensory deprivation tank of a parsonage to build her own savage reality. We saw how her sister Charlotte desperately tried to sanitize that legacy, blaming the Moors to protect Emily from a rigidly patriarchal society.
It was a necessary defense at the time.
And we uncovered the dark, punishing comedy of Mr. Lockwood's arrival, complete with dead rabbits and flying frying pans. And of course, we confronted the terrifying, boundary-destroying nature of Heathcliff and Cathy's bond.
And, you know, in an era where we constantly try to categorize, sanitize, and filter our media and our relationships, Bronte's work remains a vital, jagged reminder that human nature contains untamed, irrational forces.
It really does.
It challenges our comfortable assumptions about free will and autonomy, demanding that we look directly at the messy, sometimes frightening depths of human emotion without looking away.
It refuses to let anyone stay safely in the manicured garden.
Exactly.
So we'll leave you with a final thought to mull over. In her introduction, Daphne Merkin quotes the poet W.H. Auden, who wrote, "We are lived by powers we pretend to understand."
Such a powerful quote.
When Emily Brontë wrote this novel, did she fully understand the transgressive, destructive powers she was channeling onto the page? Or, as her sister Charlotte suggested, did the work truly hew itself out of the wild granite of her subconscious, leaving the author just as much a captive to the story as the rest of us are? Something to think about the next time you assume a classic romance is going to be a safe, polite read.